everyone. It's really great to see you all. Thank you for joining us today for our final session in the Rose Foundation's 2025 Grassroots Convening Money for the Movement Grant Writing Fundamentals. My name's Aurora, and I'm the program officer for our grassroots grant making here at Rose Foundation. We're a small nonprofit foundation based in Oakland, California. And this is our last in a 4-part series on grant writing strategies for grassroots organizations. I'm really excited for today's session. We're going to have a live grant review with a panel of environmental program officers who are going to read applications provided from the audience and provide advice about what makes a strong proposal. It's going to be a lot of fun. Our winning application is going to actually get a grant of $1,000, and you all will have an opportunity to ask questions of program officers directly. I hope you've been thinking about that and brought your questions today. If you missed an earlier session or would like to share any of these trainings with others in your network, please check out the recordings and the slides from our previous sessions. They're posted on the Rose Foundation website, and we're going to send an email next week with all of those resources to everyone who registered for the event. But because it's our last session, I just want to take a second here to thank our fabulous interpreters. Marcy and Elizabeth have been here for all of these sessions, and they've done an incredible job helping us make these trainings accessible and helping us figure out interpretation from our end here at Rose. They are the true experts, and we're really appreciative of everything that they've brought to this series. I also want to offer a thank you just as we start to all the speakers here today and to Dahlia from our previous sessions who made these trainings possible. So thank you all. All right. Let's get to business then. Today, we're going to do something a little different. Instead of a presentation, this is a panel discussion. So we're going to begin with some introductions of our panelists. Then we're going to spend the majority of our time together discussing the 4 proposals that our panelists reviewed. And then for the last half hour or so, we're going to have an open question and answer, where you'll have the opportunity to ask questions of our panelists directly. And then at the end, we're going to announce a winner and the person who gets to walk away with the grant award for this reality grant making session. So as we get into that, I figured I'd give a little bit of context. These are proposals that we requested of audience members, so small grassroots grantees of the Rose Foundation who submitted proposals, and we had more than 4. We unfortunately have to limit ourselves because we only have so much time in a session. So if your application was not one of the ones selected for discussion today, that's okay. We'll be happy to offer some feedback and advice on that, and I'll be following up with you. But for today, we have 4 applications, and we're going to put them into the chat so that you all have access to them as well and can read them and take a look and view them after the session as you're thinking about everything that our panelists have to say about them. While we're having the panel discussion itself, I'm going to ask that you all stay muted. It just helps us hear each other. And then when we get to the question and answer section, there will be an opportunity for you to raise your hand and come off mute and ask questions. If you have questions while we're going and want to add them to the chat while the panelists are discussing, we'll do our best to pull those out and add them to the conversation, or at least keep track of them so that we can ask them at the end. Yeah, okay, I think that's everything. Let's start by diving into the panel itself. Pearl, would you mind spotlighting the panelists and myself? We are joined today by 3 amazing program officers. I'm so happy to have them. Kathy Lehman is a program officer at the Harder Foundation in the Pacific Northwest. Pam Allen is a program officer at the Lisa and Douglas Goldman Foundation here in San Francisco. And Mariah Bosques is an environment program fellow at the Kresge Foundation, which is a national foundation, but they're based in Detroit. I'm going to let each of the panelists introduce themselves because I cannot do it justice. But perhaps, Kathy, would you be willing to start us off and just give a sense of who you are and how you came to be a program officer?
Okay, sure. Very happy to. Thank you for having me. I'm Kathy with the Harder Foundation. Um, I just got a notification my connection might be a little unstable, and I apologize. So if something happens, I will be right back. Um, I've been a program officer for 5 years with a family foundation, pretty small foundation that gives $1.5 million a year in the Pacific Northwest. And prior to this part of my career, I worked for grassroots community-based nonprofits for the most part for 20 years. Um, and I started in my local community and then went to a statewide organization in the environmental space. And in that kind of climate justice organizing work, realized I want to be part of moving money to solutions. We don't have a lack of solutions, we have a lack of funding for solutions. And so that's why I decided to pursue moving into the philanthropic side of the relationship of how things get done. And I'm based in Bellingham, Washington, basically the upper furthest farthest northwest corner of the country you can get.
Thanks for that, Kathy. Mariah, would you mind going next?
Absolutely. Well, hello, everyone. Hello from a very gloomy Detroit. As Aurora mentioned, I work at the Kresge Foundation on our environment team. And as she mentioned, I'm a program fellow. And so while not directly a program officer, I work very close with our program officers, review grants, do grant write-ups, review proposals, meet with grantees, develop relationships, and so on and so forth. I am fairly new in the philanthropy space. Similar to Kathy, before philanthropy, I worked at a nonprofit, a pretty small nonprofit actually, in Southwest Detroit for about 10 years. With the last 3 years of my tenure there, I was a program department director, and so spent a lot of time also writing grants to various non or to various foundations, to state and local government, etc.
Wonderful. Thank you. And Pam.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to be here today. So I'm a program officer at the Goldman Fund, as Aurora said, and we are a family foundation. I've been with the Goldman family for a couple of decades now. I've been with this branch for 13 years. I've been in philanthropy for quite a while, and similar to the other panelists, I came from the nonprofit sector. And I just want to highlight, I feel that that's very important because we know what it takes to run a nonprofit and to raise money for a nonprofit. So I feel like that's something that I'm really happy to hear that that's where we all originated in our career. And yeah, I feel like that's really important and something to keep in mind.
Yeah, very important perspective to have. All right, well, let's start with our first application. We've got 4 to review, and Pam, I think you're going to start us off with Bear Valley Protection Society. I just put the applications in the chat if folks want to follow along. But Pam, maybe you could start with just a little bit of background about who they are and then start to tell us what you thought of this application.
Okay, sure. And I'm going to be referring to the application, so hopefully it'll make sense to people and you'll be able to take a look at it. I'll also be looking at it on my other screen if I'm not looking at all of you. So first of all, thanks to everyone for participating and submitting the applications. I know 2 pages is really hard to communicate all of the wonderful things that you do. I find it's often harder to do. So thank you all. And as we go through this, some of the areas of improvement may seem kind of picky to some of you, but that's what we're here for. So in some cases, we really have to dig deep to find some areas of improvement. So I just want to, don't take it personally. So the first one is the Bear Valley Protection Society. So the mission of this organization is to protect and restore the San Bernardino National Forest, which is located in Southern California. This is an all-volunteer run organization. The work they highlight in the application is to the removal of illegal dump sites and restoration activities in the National Forest. So while this was a general support request, they do specify that they would use the funding for protective equipment for their volunteers who are, out there cleaning up debris, which often includes needles, toxic chemicals, etc. So it's important to them to protect their volunteers. So first off, just looking at the proposal, the document is organized with headers. They highlight and underline things that they feel are important to communicate. That makes it easy for me as a reader to just look at the document and be able to pick out some high-level words and concepts. And they also start off in the first paragraph with statistics. They highlight what's unique about the National Forest where they work. There's a stat in there that I didn't know, that it's one of the most visited national forests in the United States. That immediately piqued my interest. So that's good storytelling. They immediately drew me in from the first paragraph. Then the next paragraph, they go into their partners, and that really lends credibility to the organization. Then they succinctly say what they do. So I think those first two paragraphs are very well written, and they communicate a lot about the organization. Then they go to project purpose. Now, this is a general support request, but they are specifying what they would use it for, which can go either way, to be honest. If I were to critique this, I would say this could probably go a little bit later in the application, because the next paragraph is the problem and environmental concerns. They talk about the illegal dumping. They state how many pounds of trash they've removed this year alone, which is a really impressive statistic and also kind of depressing statistic. And then they talk about the environmental impact of the debris and the trash that they have there. So I really feel like in a few short paragraphs, I get a really clear picture of who this group is, what they do, and why it's important. And then the financial statement, which starts on page 2, I feel like that's pretty easy to digest. They provide a lot of information here in the description section of the budget line items, and it's clear that they are operating on a shoestring. But I do get a sense of the organization's finances just by this. Really, it's not a lot of information. And then overall, I thought this was a strong proposal. So areas of improvement. I always like to know when an organization was founded. This provides really important context, where they are in their growth trajectory, what's their capacity. When they mention their accomplishments, does it make sense for an organization that's been around 2 years? Or does it make sense for an organization that's been around 20 years? It just provides a context for kind of where the organization is. Like if this organization had only been around for a year, I'd be super impressed. Oh, it's super impressive anyway. But 20 years, okay, it makes sense. This is where they are. And also missing were stats about the number of volunteers, how often they go out, how many participate in cleanup activities. Since their request is directly related to the volunteer activities, that would have been important to include. How much PPE will $1,000 buy? How long would it outfit their volunteers? It's not a make or break for the request, but that's something that would be nice to know. And then if just one area that this is something that I thought of as I was reviewing this, they don't mention liability insurance. What is their liability? Their volunteers are out there driving Forest Service vehicles, handling toxic waste. So, I mean, as a funder, if I were taking a look at this, I would be like, well, what's their liability if a volunteer is injured? Is there a risk of the organization getting into legal trouble? And for the areas of improvement kind of questions I had. But overall, I think it's a solid application. And in the 2 pages, I got a really clear picture of the organization.
Thanks, Pam. Kathy or Mariah, I'm interested in your thoughts. Oh, Kathy, looks like Kathy's struggling with internet. So Mariah, do you mind going next?
Yeah, absolutely. Pam, first, you were very thorough, so I don't know that I'll have much more to add, but definitely want to plus one some of the things that you mentioned. The format was wonderful. It was like very easy to read and very easy to follow. I really appreciated the bold headlines and pulling out some of the information that you really wanted us to see. It felt very clear. I knew exactly, even though it is a general operating support and we don't necessarily need to know exactly where all of that funding is going. It was very clear and outlined in this proposal where it was going. And what the organization's like mission and the work that the organization does is, as Pam mentioned in the first paragraph. I also appreciated seeing the partners. I appreciated the outcomes that the 2025 for 2025 that was mentioned and it was pulled out in terms of pounds of trash. That gave me a really great visual of the work that the organization is doing. Um, yeah, so I think I'll leave it there for now, but I plus one a lot of what Pam said.
Yeah, thanks for that. I will hope to get Kathy back and get her take on it. But I'm curious because Pam, you sort of touched on this, and it brings up a question that I feel like I hear a lot, which is just sort of what is the difference between a general support and a project support request? And like if it is a general support request, are you supposed to say what the money is for? Like, are you supposed to say this is exactly how we're going to spend it? I'm curious, just from your experience, what your take is on maybe the pros and cons or the best approach there.
Well, I think I'll start with the con. The biggest con is if you pull something out and highlight it that may not be quite as compelling as some of the other aspects of your work. What I prefer to see is an overarching review of everything the organization does. Because the risk is it might not be as compelling because while PPE is important, it's kind of like, oh, is this going to really make or break the organization? Is it, but if it were included, oh, and we also provide PPE, then, it's just not as highlighted. So I would say in general, stick to the overarching activities of the organization and general support grant, unless you know that a foundation prefers otherwise. And then also I can give an example when we review a later one as well. So that's because I mean you can spend that general support grant on toilet paper if you want, but you don't have to tell me that. So so I feel like not being specific is a better way to go. But I'm curious to hear what others think.
Yeah, Kathy, glad to see you're back. We had segued briefly into a question about general support versus project support grants, and kind of what the best approach is for general support requests, and whether you should be specific about how you're trying to spend that money or not. So feel free to speak to that if you'd like, or feel free to just share your take on this particular group.
Okay, great. So sorry, I'm having trouble. Um, One thing I also plus one a lot of the thoughts that Pam shared. And I agree. I thought the project purpose could have been a little further down because the way the proposal is laid out is really building a case and it does it really well, but it gets a little interrupted by dropping the purpose in so early. One thing I thought could have strengthened this, and it might be just sort of the confusion between should we pull out specifics for a general support grant? Um, but I felt like a compelling way to talk about PPE for this proposal would be to essentially make the case that safeguarding public lands in this way cannot happen without PPE. So it's not really about the PPE, it's about safeguarding public lands through the volunteers that are doing the work that they're doing. And the PPE is just a tool that enables that to happen. And more the overarching purpose and intention of the money is about the big picture and not just getting PPE for volunteers to be doing this project. And I also really was impressed with all the in-kind support that they listed out in their financials. And I thought the way they laid that out was really creative, actually, and helpful. And really good job listing all their partners as well. Like obviously a credible organization, connected, doing good work. Yeah, that was really my only thought was they could maybe tighten up the pitch a little bit, that this example of how they're going to use the $1,000 is for the overarching concern and tying it to that a little more clearly.
Yeah, I love that. Agreed. That it really makes me think about like there is this sort of other level of kind of like how does the story reach you? Like how do you feel about it? How does you know yeah, how does it affect you? And that's what the storytelling part of it is about, right? Like that's what the crafting the message and the story helps achieve. Um, Fabulous. Any final thoughts on this one, or shall we move on to the next? Okay. Uh, Kathy, how are you feeling about your internet? Do you want to try and start off the next one, or do you want me to pass it to Mariah first? All right, I think Kathy is frozen. So Mariah, I think this one's going to you.
Oh, I think Kathy's back if we want to try.
Sure, I'd love to try.
Okay.
Oh, damn.
Kathy, which of the proposals would you like to start with?
Think she might have froze again.
I think we're going to go with you for this one,
Yeah.
Mariah. Are
Okay.
you ready?
Yep, absolutely.
Who do you want to talk about?
We can go to the Holly Grove Dixon Neighborhood Association next.
Love it.
Um, the Holly Grove Dixon Neighborhood Association is an organizing voice, as they put in their application, for the Holly Grove Dixon neighborhood in New Orleans. And the proposal talks a little bit about their programs and some of the work that they do. They mostly have programs around ways to address environment, social, and educational needs of the community. And so to jump into the actual proposal, the proposal talked a bit about the neighborhood, which I appreciated. It mentioned some demographic information, the amount of residents, some of the challenges that the residents face. Um, and then they also talked a little bit about their programs and some of the programs that they offered. So they painted a picture of with those environmental, social, and educational programs. they went into some of the work that they're doing around that. So they have a green infrastructure education program, tree planting, a solar generator program, a community garden, and so on and so forth. And I appreciated it was very brief and it was very straight to the point of what the organization does, which I appreciate, and I have a decent understanding of that. Um, and it talks a little bit about their needs, which I also appreciate. The budget was also very clear, how they wanted to use it, what they wanted to use it for. This was specifically to purchase an Asana project management subscription, and then some consulting services to go along with it. And so it was very clear. And so those were some of the things that I found to be highlights of this proposal. Um, I think some of the things that I would have liked to seen done a little bit differently. Um, Although I have an okay understanding of the organization, I think this is one of the ones where I wanted a little bit more. I would have learned I would have loved to learn a little bit more about the association and how it came to be and some of the issues, like diving into the issues that they're organizing around a little bit more, some of the mission, more of the mission and the needs for the association. Um, and then I think something else I would have appreciated as well, um, is because I think we had this conversation just before with the previous example, the proposal of what the funding was going towards, right? So for this one, it is Asana and then the consulting services. I wish that this was a little bit more, I wish they would have done some writing to make it a little bit more compelling. Because there are some other projects that are doing different things with money, and depending on your foundation and depending on the program officer, certain items might feel a little bit more compelling than potentially like a subscription service and a consultant with that. And so, and not to say that you can't spend it on those things, but just finding a way to like let us know it's why it's important. Or just not listing it, as Pam said, like if painting a fuller picture of what the organization is trying to do with the money. Um, so with that, I will stop there. And I will pass it over to Pam.
I agree again with almost everything you said. Yeah, it is so helpful that they included demographic information. I feel like of the 4 applications, this was the shortest, but I feel like I really got a good idea of what they do and who they are. But I do feel like they could have included more. The space could have been used more effectively. The financial statement of activity was good, but I think maybe a short budget would have been better, a better use of space, and also just kind of a budget is kind of better to look at because the statement of activity, if you look at that on page 2, it shows kind of a surplus. But if this were a budget, we might be able to see that actually it's not a surplus, it's money that's allocated for something. And then, yes, this is the one that I was going to highlight. It's a general support request. I did not get a very good feel for what the Asana platform was going to do for them. They could have used some of their space to really go into why they needed it. And also the consultancy fee, like why they need to pay a consultant for that. So this one would have been stronger if it was just general support. This is all we do. Because it was a very compelling application, except for what they said they're going to use the funds for.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I I think it's interesting that this one has like a complete organizational, I guess it's a budget. Um, and I'm curious to hear from you too about just like when you look at those numbers and you look at that statement, what are you reading? What is it that you're looking at first? What do you notice? Are there questions that come up when when you review financial statements? We had a session on financial statements last week, and this is one I think most people feel a little out of their depths on. So curious if you have any thoughts or advice. on that?
I'm happy to go first, Mariah, if that's okay. So I feel like, just speaking in general, we had the 4 applications to review, and they all had very different financial information / budgets. So it's very hard to compare. So I felt like I almost had to take the financial piece out of it because, like, as I mentioned on this one, if you look at the bottom line, it shows they have a net income of $54,000, right? Which, if you're looking at the 4, like, who has the greatest need, those are things that you think about, even though $54,000, I know, does not go very far. Those are things that we take into consideration. So on this one, my first thing is, wow, they've received $215,000 in funding. That is really impressive. Can I tell from this whether they have staff if they didn't mention it? I look to see if they have a deficit budget, whether the expenses match their mission and activities. For instance, sometimes I'll see, oh, they have a sub-grant line item in their budget, but they don't mention sub-grants in their application. So making sure that the budget matches the activities in the application is really important.
Yeah, there isn't much more to add. And I agree with what Pam said about we did receive different financial information from most of the grants, or the proposals. And so I didn't take a ton of time looking at this one specifically either. But yeah, something I am looking at is the amount of incoming grants already, like the amount of income they have. And then looking at the amount of expenses as well, of course. Something else that I look at, as Pam said, is if they have if they have full-time staff on here as well. Program costs, program supply costs. Um, and then outside of that, um, I think one of the other line items that I sometimes will look at is if they have um, like total like office expense, for example, like a building and like property and things like that. That's something I'll take a peek at as well.
Mhm. Kathy, we're talking about the Holly Grove Dixon Neighborhood Association group, and uh, we were talking specifically about their financial statement, the budget that they included. Um, and the question was just, when you're reviewing financial statements, what is it that you look for when, you're reading a new organization's financials?
Great. I rebooted, so hopefully I'll stick around.
We got this.
I could say a few things about this one if you want me to.
Please, we
Okay.
do.
And maybe this is a good thing because I don't know what was said already, so we'll see.
We'll see how it matches.
More consistent. I really liked how they described their organization thoroughly and used the EPA Environmental Justice Screening Tool as a really credible way to state quickly this is a very community-based organization that represents its community. And I liked the specifics around calling out the Asana project, even though these are general support requests, they know really clearly and explicitly what they're going to spend it on. And even the dollar amount wasn't rounded. It was very specific. So I liked that. I thought it was helpful. The one thing I thought could have improved this one was for them, they didn't make a case that they're disorganized or need project management. And yet they want to spend the money on a project management tool. And so I think there was probably a little more, maybe one sentence even, just to explain, sometimes we have challenges organizing volunteers because we have so much happening, and this tool has been identified as a way that we could cut through that and be more efficient and effective. Like a sentence like that would have connected the request a little more to what they're asking. But I really like this one.
Sometimes people have very different takes, but you had the same exact take as
Okay.
me and Pam on this one. Spot on. A lot of agreement.
Tested right, yeah.
I love it. Kathy, do you want to lead one while we've
Sure.
got you?
Yeah.
Who would
Let's
you
do
like
it.
to talk about?
How about have we done the Greater Neighborhood Alliance?
We have not. Let's do them.
Okay. This is a neighborhood alliance across the city of Jersey City. Their mission is dedicated to improving the quality of life for residents there, and that they bring together all kinds of folks across their city, homeowners, renters, and other stakeholders to address key issues. They promote civic engagement and engage with elected officials. And I really like that they went in right away to past successes. So they give us some clear picture of some of the things that they've already done. And that in there, they talk with really clear numbers about how many families and how many high school students they've worked with. And again, it's kind of challenging when it's a general support grant, but I like this tactic of just choosing a program to highlight as an example. Not that you're necessarily asking for the money for that one highlight, but it's a good way to give us a little more concrete information for a general support grant, just to highlight something. And then they went into their financials a little bit, and talked about how they would spend the $1,000 and how it broke down into different categories, and concluded with who they work with, which is a really good, robust list, lends a lot of credibility, contextualizes the work. And yeah, I think that was the overview. So my initial take, um, right off the bat in the beginning, I got a little red flag. This might not happen for everybody, but the words holding elected officials accountable could be construed as political activity. A lot of C4 organizations, not C3 organizations, but political organizations that are categorized differently, do things called elected official accountability, like they have accountability programs. And those can be not C3 compliant. I'm not saying that this is, because I don't know enough about what they mean when they say accountability. But as a program officer, that's a flag for me to maybe make a phone call and find out more exactly what they mean. Because I can't give a grant to a C4 organization that uses it or does political activity. I thought the metrics that they listed under the mission and impact section were really good to have, but they didn't tell me if there are 50 families they worked with last year out of 100 or out of 100,000. So I didn't have a lot of context, what this means, or if they generally hit 50 families annually, and how long they've been doing that. So it just was a little bit of, felt a little random and disconnected to some context that would have helped me understand better what kind of impact they're having. And then just a little bit, the way they described the use of funds felt like, wow, this $1,000 is being asked to do a lot. And I think that's just the challenge, when you're asking for general support money. We don't have to make the case that the money we're asking for is going to do all the stuff that we do. So I appreciate that that's challenging to articulate when you're trying to explain everything that we do and we're asking for an amount of money to support us generally. But some of the other proposals were a little more specific in the way they articulated what they wanted to do with it. And I know that they do get really specific in this breakdown of where the $1,000 goes, but they're just some sort of bold statements like this $1,000 will enable them to provide supplies, stipends, and activity for 250 people. That's like, how do you spread $1,000 across all of that? Just, it seemed a little audacious. So not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, but it did sort of niggle my brain a little bit like, I wonder, that's not enough money to do everything they're claiming it's going to do. And so just a little more articulation, maybe that this just helps us with all of the big picture stuff that we do. That's okay. We know it's only $1,000. So it's okay to explain this is a small step in the direction we want to go together, and you could help make it possible in a very small way. Um, yeah, I think that was
Yeah, that's
my
pretty fun.
big picture take on.
Totally. Yeah, it does make me like come back to that question we had about like what kind of financial information is useful to you as a reviewer. And it sounds like this is one where like maybe a little bit more context would have been beneficial, right? Like some more information about other sources of revenue, or what other money is going
Yeah,
into the program.
yeah, you just reminded me, my other thought about the breakdown was if they could have said how this moved them toward the full budget goal for each of these line items and what the gap was would have been helpful context.
Yeah, interesting. Pam or Mariah, any thoughts in response to Kathy's thoughts there, or new ideas that you had about this particular group?
Um, Again, not too many new thoughts, Kathy. That was very thorough. I did appreciate again the formatting. It felt pretty similar to our first proposal where the bold, it was very clear. It went from organization overview to mission and impact to a highlight to I think partners are towards the end, but that's also another helpful bucket that they mentioned, as well as again, I think it was already mentioned, but the use of funds and how they'll be using some of the money. That was very helpful. Um, the I agree that I wish I would have had a better understanding of context. I appreciate the numbers of like supporting this many number of families and high school students. But some more information would be helpful just to get an idea of like 50 out of 57 or 50 out of like 100 families. It would just be helpful to know. Um, and I appreciated the highlighting the youth program and talking about some of the work that they do within the youth program. Um, I also agree that it would have been helpful to understand a little bit more about their, but I know we mentioned we didn't need to see the whole financial statement of the past proposal that we looked at, but a program budget nonetheless is helpful to understand gaps. And so I think I would have appreciated that as well.
And I agree with all of the positives of this one and everything that they did right. I think the big thing that was missing for me is what's Jersey City like? What are the demographics? I have zero clue. So from the start, I didn't know, what the need is in this community, and we can compare it to the New Orleans one, right? They made that clear from the very beginning. That was the piece that was missing for me. And then it's a general support request. You don't need to provide a project. I mean, they provided a project budget essentially. So I would like to have seen a summary of their full budget. Also, again, I don't know how they're staffed. I don't know what their full budget is. So those were the things that jumped out at me. Although I did think this was a very well organized and it was a really good proposal, but there were some pretty significant holes.
Question in the chat that is there a suggestion for the order of stating the problem/need versus mission and impact? Like what order should we be putting that information in our proposals? Do we start with the problem or do we start with the mission? Any thoughts?
Uh, my personal preference, I don't know if it's a best practice, but everything should stem from the mission, and the mission identifies the organization fundamentally. So I personally like to have the mission come first and then identify the problem and impact.
Got some thumbs up for that. Okay. And another question is, how many program officers will normally review a proposal? This can vary a lot depending on the organization. I'm curious if you guys could speak to your own foundations. How many people are reading a proposal?
We have a very small staff. We have 4 people total at our foundation. So typically one program officer will read it, and then we talk among staff about it. And then the ones that go forward are then reviewed by other staff members. So it's a kind of a hybrid where parts of it will get reviewed by others. But yeah, every foundation is different. They say once you know one foundation, you know one foundation. The process we have is probably not replicated anywhere else.
Yeah. Mariah, what about you guys?
Yeah, so Kresge, we don't have it's really dependent on our program team. So each of our program teams, we don't have one way of making grants. And so each of our program teams do things a little bit differently. So I'll speak a little bit more towards the environment side and what we do. And so typically we don't actually have like an open system of applications. It's very much relationship-based grant making. Um, and so depending on what the grant is and which strategy it's under really changes how many people read it. So if it is a cross-team grant, meaning where it works with environment and maybe our arts and culture team, you can guarantee that most likely at least 2 program officers are reviewing it before it goes to our respective managing directors who also have to approve it before then it goes into our president. And so it really is dependent on which team you're working with, what kind of grant it is, if it like is working cross teams. But I'll give an example of one of the grants that I typically touch. The proposal will come in, and again, it's not like a random proposal. It's very much a relationship we already have, and I will typically take a look at it, and then the program officer I work closely with, she will also take a look at it. We will then turn that into a grant write-up, where it's a much more condensed version of the whole proposal. And that goes to our president, who then approves or denies the grant. So hope that's helpful. But again, it really is different, and it's also extremely different from program team to program team. So it can be a wide variety of ways and people who are looking at it.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Mariah. Kathy, what about you? How's your process
Yeah.
organized?
Harder's also very small. We have 2 program officers, and most of our grants are divvied up separately. So a majority of my work, I'm the only one reading them. But there are a handful that sort of cross, like Mariah was speaking, that cross different portfolios that we both touch, and then we'll both evaluate and discuss those.
Yeah, and I can speak to Rose. It depends on the program, but for many of our programs, we have like a funding board of reviewers um, that both Kathy and Pam have participated on funding boards for Rose. Um, and in that case, it may be, 2 people read the proposal and then discuss with a larger group. And they've probably also been viewed by a program officer for kind of basic eligibility and fit. So it really depends, Unfortunately, there isn't one answer. We got another question that says, on finances, you mentioned seeing a surplus wasn't good, but aren't you looking for financially secure organizations? Do you want to see a small deficit? Pam, do you want to?
Since that was my comment, I can address that. So sorry that wasn't clear. So I think there's a couple of issues here. So one point I wanted to make was that we don't have the same financial information from all of the applicants. which makes it difficult. So because we have this specific piece of information, it provides context that we don't have for the others, right? So in the statement of activities, which is different from a budget, if I'm just going by what it's called, statement of activities is how much they've raised and how much they've spent in a given time. So if I had seen a budget and a statement of financial activities, and then at our foundation, we also ask for a balance sheet and we look at all three of those, you get a big picture, right? So the statement of activities shows that they're in a healthy cash position as of that date, but a budget would tell me, oh, but their full budget, their expenses are X amount, so they'll be spending that, what appears as a surplus, on these things by the end of the year. And then in the context of the 4 proposals, I could think, oh, well, they've been really successful raising money because they show that they have this $50,000, but we don't know if the other organizations are running a deficit or a surplus. So I was trying to make 2 different points that might have gotten confused there. So I just tried to kind of ignore that information because I didn't have the same information for all of the applicants. But at most foundations, we ask for all that information so we'd be able to compare all of them. Did that clarify or make it more confusing?
Let's see if Janet responds as yes, yes, yes. Wonderful. Okay, great. Well, shall we do the last one? Who is anyone itching to present? Or should I pick someone? This will be Coalition for Responsible Transportation Priorities.
I mean, I'm happy. I actually know this from the Grassroots Fund, this organization, so I'm happy to present unless anyone else really, really wants to do it. Okay. All righty. So I'm just looking at my notes here. So I thought that oh, sorry, I wasn't prepared to really present what they do. So let me pull up the proposal. All right. So this organization works in Northern California on the coast, and they work on transportation as their name suggests. So their goals are to essentially support a variety of safe transportation in the area, walking, biking, public transit, and other positive modes of transportation. So a lot of their work is around safety. They do a great job on page 2 of pulling out 3 of their priority projects. And by making it safer to take these sustainable transportation modes, it's going to have an impact on the environment, essentially. So I thought that the pictures, if I didn't already say this, the pictures kind of broke up the text, which I thought was nice if we're talking about presentation. Otherwise, this was very dense. This one was a little bit harder for me to get through. And a positive is that I actually really like this very brief budget that they presented at the top. I thought they maximized the space very well with that. It doesn't include a lot, but you do get a picture on what they spend their money on and that they do have staff. This is a staffed organization. Let me just pull up my notes for any other positives. I did think it was a clear narrative. They did pack a lot into a limited space. I thought they did a pretty good job of connecting the issues they work on and that they care about to transportation. I thought and this one was a good general support request. I thought this was the best example of a general support request where they really they went over the broad brush of what they do. And where they could improve, I thought the numbered paragraphs with their 3 priority projects, that was a lot. It was too dense. They could have summarized it, stayed a little more high level. If it was a multi-page application, then that information is really interesting and it would have been helpful. But you don't have a lot of space here. You really got to stick higher level. And again, I felt like making a stronger through line to the work they do and the environmental impact would have been helpful on this one. And as I've said with others, the year founded and how they're staffed explicitly would have been good to know. So that's all I have on that one.
Kathy, what were your thoughts?
Sure. I feel like a lot often when you have a climate proposal related request, it's hard to bring it down to earth in a way because the climate is such a ginormous issue. And they are, I really thought they created a good narrative here. And one thing that could have probably helped them sort of bring us along with them on these things being part of their climate solution would be to say how California's North Coast is a leader in climate in the world, or could be a model for other communities, or would be part of a region doing similar stuff. Something that kind of gave us a little more than this place is, one place solving climate isn't solving climate. And so we have to acknowledge that and contextualize a little bit. How does us doing something that works here help with the large problem? So I thought they could have said something about, why this is their theory of change, that if they do these things in their community, it would have some kind of meaningful relationship to the larger climate change issue. I mean, they're talking about transportation, obviously, but the broad one is climate. At least that's what I took from it. And they went a lot into the problems of transportation being part of climate, which was educational, but also, yeah, kind of a little dense. And the projects, I found it too a little overwhelming, maybe just a lot of information. And I think I would have probably chosen the Eureka 4th and 5th Street one if it were me as a highlight, because I just found that one outrageous, that there's such a problem with pedestrian fatalities. And it sort of still connects this transportation issue to larger climate work that they care about, but also talks about it in a way that's super tangible on the ground in community, that a funder would be like, oh my goodness, there's a dire impact and a dire need. This is an example. So that could help me think I want to put this one toward the top of a list. I thought their budget was easy to understand. I didn't love that it appears to be a deficit budget, meaning their income is less than their expenses, and there wasn't really any acknowledgement to that. But it's a small org, and those things, it's not like a big red flag, just something I might have talked to somebody about. Also didn't love that the other category is more than supplies and insurance. So what is in other? Because supplies and insurance is important enough to call out separately. I just wonder what's in other all of a sudden. Otherwise, I might not have even thought about it.
Right. And we don't, any other miscellaneous, we don't, it's like, we don't like that either. It's like, just
Yeah.
say what it is.
Yeah. So those were my thoughts on this one.
I'm not gonna recap what everyone else has already said, but I think something that I would have appreciated as well is so they pull out the three ways that they plan to spend the money, and they don't go in detail of how the $1,000 will be spent. But something I think could have been helpful is they pull out three very big things. Like I can imagine spending $1,000 just on paint, right? Which is like the first sentence of the first thing that they talk about, the quick build projects. So using paint and other low cost materials. I could see just spending $1,000 super easily on that. And so I think something I would have appreciated, even if it's just a line or two of, um, I guess how the money will make the difference in the larger project, maybe like maybe call out a gap that they have. That could have been more helpful because otherwise this is a lot of work to do and with like the $1,000. And I know it's general operating support, but an idea of how it will make a difference, I think would have been helpful.
And can I just jump in and raise one point that Kathy reminded me of about problem statements? I'll try to keep this brief. So, yeah, when you're talking about climate, the problem statement isn't here that, we all know that there's a climate crisis, right? The problem statement is that sustainable transportation methods aren't viable here because it's not safe or because it's not public transportation isn't supported. So really drill down on how your work addresses the problem. I get so many proposals that will have 4 paragraphs about the climate crisis. Then they go into their work and it's like, but how is your work gonna have an impact on this? So really drill down. So for example, in this one, we want to make it safer, like really say that. We want to make it safer to bike and walk in our community. So if that helps, like really like drill down to what you're doing and how that impacts the steps that go up.
Yeah, I love that. I'm curious what you all think about the pictures. Pictures, yay, nay?
I like having pictures because it just breaks up the text a little bit. But maybe pictures that like instead of the person getting on the bus, maybe a group of volunteers doing something. But I think it's good to have pictures and logos as much as you can.
Wonderful. Oh, Mariah, did you have something you wanted to share?
No, go ahead.
Okay. I also wanted to ask, it kind of came up tangentially on a couple of these, but the sort of question of staffing and that kind of information. And maybe we could expand that because not all organizations have staff, but I'm curious what you all are looking for or thinking about related to like organizational capacity and what kind of information is helpful in proposals that kind of give you hints about that. I know personally, often that's something I'm looking at, like how many people are working on all of this? Does it seem like something that those many people could actually accomplish? Um, yeah, so curious if there are any thoughts on that area. Kathy, do you have a
Sure.
opinion? Yeah.
Um, on the Rose Funding Board, I think we explicitly have that as a question, how realistic is this work plan and these financials? And one of the things we look at is how many people they have at their disposal to utilize the resources for what they say they're going to do. And does that feel like it's realistic? At my foundation, I usually I know the group pretty well, so I usually know who's doing the work and how many people they have at their disposal. So there's not a lot of mystery there, but it is a really important piece. And we do ask for information about the entire board of directors and um, how much time of different paid staff are going to be put toward this. It just helps round out the picture a lot, whether or not folks are I think there's a tendency sometimes to try and overpromise and to be more compelling. And as a program officer, one of our jobs is to try and assess, is this doable? Because we want you to be successful. And even if it requires a conversation and you apply again next time, but you're set up for success, that would be our goal, is that if we fund you, you're able to do the work. So yeah, we're looking at the people power as well as the other pieces.
a question in the chat about in-kind support. Oh, sorry, lost it. Let me pull it back up. I'm curious about the best way to show the in-kind work of 50 interns a year. That can seem like a crazy amount of in-kind money compared to our other income. So yeah, what if most of your support is, donated time rather than actual, money revenue?
Yeah, that's a really tough one. One way that we look at that is would the organization be able to do the work without that in-kind labor? Or would they be able to replace that in-kind labor? So it's important for us to see that. I like to see in-kind because it gives you a full picture of what it takes to do this work. And can the work be done if that in-kind support goes away? But, as far as how to calculate that, yeah, I'm not sure about the specifics of that because it can make your organization look a lot bigger than it is.
Kathy or Mariah, did you want to comment on that?
I find it really credible to have a long list of volunteer time that is part of your project. I mean, just similarly to a good list of solid partnerships, this means that these people are invested and care. If they're interns, they're probably community-based folks. To me, that would be a real plus. I probably would want to know if there's any, stipends or meaningful compensation for these folks too, so it's not, extracting too much from younger or entry-level people. But generally speaking, if you're attracting that many interns to your work, you're doing something right. So I think that was awesome.
Yeah, there are a couple questions that I think are kind of related. One says, I find it depressing to say that what we have accomplished with our small volunteer team, and then to be told that we can't have the money because we don't have the capacity. The money would only expand our already pretty solid efforts, ideas. So this sort of catch 22 of like we can't expand because we don't have funding. Um, and then there's another question that says, if you're hoping to grow the number of staff through a grant, how does that fit with the question of capacity and people power if you don't have them yet? So I'm just curious if you guys have thoughts on either of those. Like, how are you balancing that question?
Those are really good questions. I think on the latter one, in that situation, when you're trying to make the case for bringing on staff with the grant money, that's the crux of it, is you want your case to be so strong that the foundation it's clear we want this work to happen, and the only way it happens is with staff capacity. So we're excited to make it possible for you to bring on another staff member. Like, we're going to be part of the impact that this is going to drive. So I think the case is a little different in that regard. It's not as much about the entirety of the organization, but about the new program you're launching. And that's those are the dots you want to connect as to why this new program requires this new person to achieve this specific outcome that is part of our bigger project or our bigger goal.
Right. It's about what you're, oh, sorry, Kathy, I thought you were
Go
finished.
ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to add, yes, so the capacity, it's about what the staff you have or volunteers that you have, how many you want to bring on, and what you promise. It's not saying, it's all three of those together. If you're over-promising what you say you're going to do with the grant, then that's something that we have to analyze. So if you present your case in a strong way and a realistic way, then, I mean, that's what you need to focus on, right? It's what you promise based on what you have and what you want to add.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like finding the right balance.
Yeah, and I think that makes, I want to say, oftentimes, honestly, this might sound weird, but from a funding perspective, oftentimes asking for a little bit less is more powerful because we get it. It's going to take 5 to 8 years to build a program. Um, it's incremental and it takes time, and it's okay to be small and grassrootsy and bootstrapping in early years and to have a lot of volunteer time. What we want to see is that you have a plan and that it's realistic and that it's building incrementally towards something that is grounded in reality. That's a lot more important than um, a really exciting new sexy thing that you think needs to maybe be pitched in a way that we would get really excited about it and choose that over others. It's more important, I think, to make a solid, um, consistently built case that this is where we're going, and we invite you to be part of it with us because we're gonna get here, and you're invited along for the ride. Not that we're desperate and we need you, but we want you to partner with us on this vision we hold and that we have a really clear case for.
Mm.
Hope that makes sense.
I want to open it up so that folks uh, who have questions can ask them directly, especially if you don't have access to the chat. So if anyone does have a question they'd like to ask of the panelists, please raise your hand and I can call on you and you can come off mute. Beverly, I see you're our first. Would you like to ask your question?
Thank you. It's my primary question is one that's been touched upon but not comprehensively about if you're in your early years, we're in our fifth, and you're building capacity, you have a volunteer executive director, but you don't have a paid executive director. It's all volunteer driven, and our budget varies year to year as we raise funds. What are the key things in finding grantors who may wish to help with an organization's building capacity as opposed to grants that are based on whether you already have that capacity? And then if I may, one minor thing, as a Native California-led nonprofit, we generally avoid the word mission because the California missions are negative for people emotionally. So if a grant wants a mission statement, do we just call it a mission statement without explaining that? Because we need to get the funds and it's a nuanced issue. How do we balance that? That's an aside that's not as relevant to the whole group. So if you want to ignore that question, I understand. But I just thought terminology in general is an interesting issue and can sometimes be triggering, as it is in this context for the Native California board members of our Native-led nonprofit. I hope that makes sense.
Thanks, Beverly. Kathy, did you want to say something? Yeah.
Yeah, was that Beverly that made that comment you said? Yeah, thank you, Beverly. I think that was really, really helpful insight and appreciate you calling it out about that word in particular. Not something I'd heard before and something we should definitely normalize and talk about. Or understand to talk less about. Whatever the case may be. Your question about how do we find funders who I think I understood you to say who buy into our desire to grow and help us do that, even if we have volunteer executive director and our budget varies from year to year. This is where I think a relationship and building a relationship over time with a program officer can be really helpful. If you have a vision for where you're trying to go and consistent work, even if the budget varies from year to year, but you're working consistently in community on issues. and a program officer has expressed interest or understanding of that, that's a person to build a relationship with and cultivate and bring them into, um, connection and collaboration with what you're trying to do. Invite them in to get to know you and your organization, and maybe try and build their personal connection and enthusiasm to your work. Because if a program officer can see themselves or what they're also trying to accomplish in your organization's work, they can invest over time, and they're not as attached to rapid outcomes, but they can understand these things do take time and they are willing to be part of that over time. I think that can really help. I know it's hard to know how to build relationships sometimes with program officers because philanthropy is a bit of a black box and kind of mysterious. And we're trying, I think, at Rose and in many places, and a thing like this right here is designed to demystify a lot of philanthropy, but it's still that way. But I, for one, would be happy to talk to anyone on this call if it would be helpful to just kind of demystify stuff and keep talking. So reach out to get contact info if you'd like to. But I think having a clear plan and sharing that with a foundation and a program officer is a great start, that you know where you're going, at least generally. And again, like I said earlier, inviting them into that plan can be great. So it doesn't feel like random or short term or haphazard, but that it's one piece of a larger puzzle that they can understand. I hope that might be helpful in terms of getting more support for more staff and maybe a full-time executive director eventually.
Thanks, Kathy. Chris, I'm going to call you in just a second, but before I do that, Mariah, Pam, Kathy, I'm going to ask you to send your rankings to Timothy Bell. So think about which of these proposals was the most compelling. All right, Chris, I see that you have your hand raised. Do you want to share your question?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I was just wondering if you all could provide suggestions for how to balance, really naming the problems, the problem statement and the problems facing the communities we're serving, without getting really bogged down, perhaps in like kind of negative language versus using positive or empowering language, perhaps. Just, yeah, any insight on how to strike that balance? Thank you.
A good question, Chris. I'm gonna let the panelists have a second because I know they're doing multiple things at once. And I guess I'm sort of curious if you have specific examples of that kind of negative language. I think there's clearly a balance, and you don't want to not mention the problems that the community is facing, because oftentimes that can be the most compelling part. The way I would think about it is, to sort of state the situation, but then don't forget and pivot soon into the thing that the organization is doing to address that, right? That's the reason for the request in the first place. Um, and yeah, I think, lingering extensively on the problems facing the community isn't going to help in the long run, but it's pairing those two things, the problem with the solution that you're offering. Any of the panelists have a thought that they'd like to add in response to Chris's question?
Sorry, I didn't hear the question. I was providing my rankings.
Okay, it is, how do you balance like stating the problem facing the community versus using positive and empowering language and not getting bogged down in, in the negative situation that the community is dealing with?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think you have to assume knowledge on the reader and that they'll understand what the issues are. So yeah, I agree with what Aurora said. Just really try to focus more on the solution. I mean, sometimes I'll see, like, I just got a 2-pager. The first page was the problem, 2 paragraphs on the second page about the solution. That's the opposite balance.
Adam, do you want to share your question? Adam, are you there?
Yes, sorry, it took me a
There
minute.
we go.
So I live in, or I'm with the Clinch Coalition. We do a lot of forest or a lot work around logging in the public lands. And our region of Southwest Virginia is particularly our county in Southwest Virginia, Wise County, is currently being targeted by logging, nuclear, natural gas, data centers, and a whole bunch of other stuff that I can't even remember right now. But there's like four of us tiny little organizations working on these issues in this area. Um, Problem that I run into with a lot of grant writing is the diversity question, because we are a 93% white region. And so like diversity is limited just by the population. Um, and I was wondering about how, because that seems like it's been a limiting factor for the last year of trying to get funding, which along with the movement environment in general. But do you have suggestions on effective ways of approaching that question for rural communities like us that are like right in the center of the front lines, but don't necessarily have the full breadth of diversity that is expected from a lot of the funding criteria now?
Yeah, I know that's been a topic of conversation at the Rose Foundation, particularly for like the Northern California. So economic diversity is something that we look at. There are different types of diversity, so that's what we have looked at in the past when there aren't other types of diversity, is really looking at the economic diversity and the needs there.
Yeah, I'll say a lot of diversity metrics also include rural populations as impacted in different ways. And I think you could probably craft a pretty sophisticated case about this community being impacted by a number of really high level, corporatized, global, dominant industries.
That's kind of what I do.
Yeah. Also, if there are indigenous communities within the region that you work, beginning to build relationships there and understand the context and be able to speak to that might be an opportunity too to truly
Mhm.
flesh out the frame of that place a little bit more.
One of the ways we would do it was, or I've done, is focus on less on the diversity of our organization and more on the diversity of the impact of the work. Because like our work is widely impactful through everybody in our region because we've been exploited by coal for 100 years. But so that's kind of where I was going that way. Yeah.
Thanks, Adam.
Thank you.
All right, we're running out of time. So before, Shruti, I'll give you a chance for final question. But before we do that, I'm going to throw into the chat the survey about today's session. So please, folks, if you have a couple minutes to give us a little feedback, it's very helpful for our planning, and we really appreciate it. Shruti, do you want to share your question?
Yes. Thanks y'all for being here. It was awesome to have it a little bit demystified and hear things from y'all's perspective. My question was, would you be able to explain a little bit more about how to narratively balance the like I feel like sometimes funders want organizations that they fund to be profitable or like sustainable, financially independent, like whatever version of that you want to call it in whatever way. But then there's also, I think, sometimes things I hear. I know I'm next to a bus. Can y'all still hear me? Awesome, thank you. Okay. But sometimes then I feel like their funders also want to hear that this money is needed and will make a difference. And it's not just going to be like, I feel like I was in a funder meeting and they were like, "Oh, we don't want to fund the same old stuff with just more money." That's something that was told, that was said. So I'm wondering, yeah, like how do you kind of balance that? Can you explain more on y'all's ends about what is appealing in which context, what you're looking for? Um, yeah, I think that like that would really demystify things for me.
Anyone want to speak to that?
I guess I feel like if a
Yeah.
funder's saying we don't want to fund the same old things with more money, that's the wrong funder.
Right, absolutely.
I'm
Um,
sorry, it was the Metropolitan Transportation Commission that said that. Sorry to be honest.
Well, yeah, it just it speaks to a larger issue about the importance of connecting with funders who are genuinely trying to do similar things to what you're doing, and that you can form a true partnership there. And I think that's one of the more challenging things, especially because a lot of us funders are invite only, and continue to enjoy the dynamics of old, where we were sort of away from the public view and had a mysterious, I'm going to speak to that again. I'm on a soapbox, but sort of the black box of philanthropy. And many foundations, including Rose, are trying to open up philanthropy and make it more of a true partnership with the nonprofit sector. And those are the funders you want to be in relationship with, who are really in it with you.
Right. And when you talked about financial health, there are a lot of factors that go into that, from the issue area, the geographic area, the demographics. It's really not cookie cutter. So again, to Kathy's point, you really have to find a funder that understands you. And understands your organization. And it's not going to be the same across every foundation, or for me, even every organization. So yeah, I mean, this is an art, not a science. It's really, really difficult to be to have rules that apply to everyone. Because that's just not the way philanthropy works. And then also we have our boards, right? It's like, I don't set our priorities. I don't make the decisions. It's our boards. So we also have that in play here. But what I wanted to also say that I wish we could fund all 4 of these, and that's what we're dealing with. Just because you get turned down, it doesn't mean your program isn't important, doesn't mean it wasn't a good proposal. It's just, that's the game, right? I mean, we just can't fund everything, and it's painful, but that's the reality. So I hope people don't get too discouraged when they get turned down, because sometimes it's just the tough decisions that we have to make.
Yeah, we hardly got into it today, but the whole other aspect of this decision making is fit with the particular objectives and guidelines of a particular funding opportunity. And those could be set by the board, they could be set by other restrictions on the money, but this was one of the rare occasions where the request wasn't to fit a particular set of guidelines, but usually that's the number one thing that program officers are thinking about when they're reading your application is, how well does this work and this project achieve the aims that I'm supposed to be achieving with this money? So agreed.
That made
Thumbs
it
up to
hard.
Pam that it is almost never personal, right? And it is almost never a reflection of the value of your work. All right, I know that we're over, so I want us to wrap up, but before we do, I want to say that the votes are in, and the organization that is going to be walking away with $1,000 grant is our first application, Bear Valley Protection Society, a wonderful combination of clarity and succinctness in their presentation. All right, I am going to leave it at that for us. I want to say thank you again to Mariah, to Pam, and to Kathy for all of their input and the work and thought that they put into this panel discussion. Thank you all so much for being here. And thank you to everyone who joined us. It was really wonderful to have you with us for this convening. If you're interested in viewing recordings of this session and previous sessions, we will be sending them all out via email, and you can find them on Rose's website. So please check them out, share them, and if you've got questions or feedback, please email myself or anyone else at Rose, our general email. It'll come to me, and we'll get back to you with what other support we can offer. Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Have a good Friday, everyone. Take care.